April 1797. Napoleon Bonaparte is deep inside the Austrian hereditary lands, less than 100 miles from Vienna. His army has crossed rivers, mountain passes, and nearly the entire length of northern Italy. Its supply line stretches back through hostile valleys. The French armies expected to advance from Germany have not yet reached him. Revolt is beginning behind his lines, and now Austrian representatives have arrived to discuss peace. Napoleon is only 27 years old. He is not the head of the French Republic. He is not its foreign minister. He does not possess unlimited authority to redraw Europe. But the men sent by Paris are still far away. The Austrian negotiators are standing in front of him, and Napoleon decides that France will not wait. 3 months earlier, the campaign had appeared to end at Rivoli. Alvinci's final relief army had been defeated in the mountains. Provera had surrendered near Lada Favorite. On February 2, 1797, the fortress of Mantua capitulated after months of hunger, disease, and failed rescue attempts. Austria had lost its principal military base in northern Italy. For the first time since Napoleon entered the peninsula, his army was no longer tied to the blockade. The soldiers who had repeatedly marched back to defend Mantua could now move in one direction, east toward the Austrian frontier. But before confronting Austria, Napoleon turned south. The Papal States had supported the coalition against France, and relations with Pope Pius VI had deteriorated again. French forces advanced rapidly through Romagna and the Marche. Resistance collapsed, and negotiations opened at Tolentino. On February 19, the Pope accepted a severe peace. The Papal States confirmed the loss of Avignon, and the Comtat Venaissin surrendered territory in northern Italy and agreed to further financial and artistic contributions. Napoleon did not destroy the papal government. That restraint was not simply mercy. Occupying Rome would consume soldiers, money, and time when Austria remained the decisive enemy. Tolentino demonstrated something new. The treaty also supplied the French war effort. Money, provisions, and valuable works were demanded from defeated governments and sent toward the army or back to France. These contributions helped an impoverished republic continue fighting, but they also made Napoleon the distributor of resources, rewards, and punishment across Italy. Officers, politicians, and local governments increasingly addressed themselves to the general rather than waiting for instructions from Paris. Napoleon was already behaving as more than an army commander. He was deciding which governments should survive, what they should pay, and how French power would be organized in Italy. Paris approved the victory, but every independent decision increased the distance between the general and the directory that had appointed him. While Napoleon was in central Italy, Vienna prepared a new defense. Command passed to Archduke Charles, the younger brother of Emperor Francis II. Charles was not another exhausted commander sent to rescue Mantua. In 1796, he had defeated French armies on the Rhine and restored Austria's position in Germany. He understood the danger. If the French army of Italy crossed the eastern Alps before Austrian forces were reorganized, the war could reach the approaches to Vienna. Charles gathered the troops available in Friuli and along the Alpine routes. Reinforcements were still arriving. His task was to delay Napoleon, preserve the army, and protect the roads into the Austrian heartland. Napoleon also received reinforcements. General Jean-Baptiste Bernadotte brought troops from the army of the Sambre and Meuse. These soldiers had fought in Germany and possessed their own traditions and pride. Their arrival increased French strength, but it also created rivalry with the veterans of the Army of Italy. Napoleon used competition as motivation. Each formation wanted to prove that it was the most reliable army of the Republic. The strategic plan divided the French advance across several routes. The main force would move east through the Venetian mainland and Friuli. Massena operated toward the northern roads and the passes around Tarvis. Joubert advanced through the Tyrol, preventing Austrian forces there from striking the French flank and rear. On a map, the arrows appeared to converge on Austria. The advance also crossed territory belonging to the officially neutral Republic of Venice. Napoleon required roads, food, horses, and freedom of movement from Venetian authorities while accusing them of tolerating enemies of France. Venice attempted to avoid open war, but neutrality became almost impossible when tens of thousands of foreign soldiers marched through its mainland provinces. The route to Austria was already creating the next political crisis behind the army. On the ground, every arrow crossed rivers swollen by winter rain, narrow roads, damaged bridges, and mountain valleys where a small defending force could delay an army. The French advance began in March. Archduke Charles withdrew methodically, looking for ground where he could slow the French without sacrificing the army before all his reinforcements arrived. The first major barrier was the Tagliamento River. On March 16, Austrian troops formed beyond the river near Valvazzone. The water, the open banks, and the enemy guns created a dangerous crossing. French infantry could not attack in a single dense column. They had to enter the current, maintain formation, and emerge under fire. Napoleon deployed artillery and organized the divisions for a broad assault. Bernadotte's soldiers and veterans of the Italian campaign moved toward the water on separate parts of the line. The crossing became a test of discipline. Men waded through the river, carrying muskets and ammunition above the surface. Guns fired across the open ground. Units that reached the opposite bank had to reform before the Austrians could throw them back into the water. The French established their bridgehead. Once enough infantry reached the eastern bank, French cavalry and artillery began crossing behind them. The battle changed from a contested river passage into a struggle for the roads beyond Valvazzone. Charles could still impose casualties, but remaining too long risked losing the route toward the Alps. His decision to withdraw preserved Austrian troops for another defense. While conceding the space Napoleon needed to maintain momentum. Archduke Charles countered, but he did not commit his entire army to a battle that might trap it against river and mountains. As French pressure increased, the Austrians withdrew. Tagliamento was not the annihilation of Charles's army. It was something strategically more important. The eastern road remained open. Napoleon pushed forward before the Austrians could establish another stable line. French columns entered Friuli, captured crossings, and moved toward the routes leading through the Julian Alps. The next crisis formed around Tarvis. The mountain pass connected the Italian side of the Alps with Carinthia. Whoever controlled it could move troops between the valleys and threaten the retreat of forces still operating to the south. Massena's advance guard reached Tarvis and drove away the first defenders. But Austrian forces approached from different directions, attempting to recover the pass and reopen their route. From March 21 to 23, fighting spread through the narrow valleys around Tarvis. The terrain divided the battle into separate clashes. Columns disappeared behind ridges. Orders moved slowly. Snow, rock, and forest restricted artillery and made it difficult to understand what was happening beyond the next bend. Massena held the critical ground while other French formations converged. Austrian units attempting to force their way through found the exits closing around them. This was not a single frontal collision. Massena pressed from the west, while formations moving through the surrounding valleys threatened the Austrian line of retreat. A road that had offered safety now became a bottleneck. Wagons, guns, and infantry competed for the same narrow exits. The French did not need to occupy every mountain. They needed to control the junctions that connected the Austrian columns. Part of the Austrian force escaped. Thousands of others were captured, along with guns, wagons, and supplies that could not be moved through the blocked roads. Tarvis transformed the campaign. The Alps were no longer a wall protecting Austria. They had become a series of corridors through which the French were advancing. On March 28, Napoleon and Massena entered Klagenfurt after Archduke Charles evacuated the city. The French were now inside the Habsburg hereditary lands. Napoleon issued proclamations claiming that France had come to end the war, not to destroy the Austrian people. The language was diplomatic, but the army continued moving. Charles retreated toward the approaches to Vienna. French troops fought further actions at Neumarkt and Unsmarkt. Each success pushed the Austrian army eastward and carried Napoleon farther from Italy. The advance looked unstoppable. It was also becoming dangerous. The army of Italy was deep in mountainous territory, with a long supply line behind it. Joubert's force remained separated in the Tyrol. The French armies on the Rhine had not yet created the pressure Napoleon expected from the north. The Austrians were retreating toward their reserves. The French were marching away from theirs. Every mile closer to Vienna increased Napoleon's bargaining power. Every mile also increased the risk that his army could be isolated. Then reports arrived from behind the front. Tension in the Venetian mainland was becoming open resistance. French requisitions, political interference, and local hostility had created an explosive situation. Violence would soon erupt around Verona in the uprising remembered as the Veronese Easter. Napoleon could defeat the army in front of him and still lose control of the roads behind him. Military victory had created a moment of opportunity, not permanent security. On March 31, from Klagenfurt, Napoleon wrote to Archduke Charles and proposed negotiations. He presented peace as an act that could spare further bloodshed, but the letter also carried an unmistakable threat. The French would continue advancing until Austria answered. Napoleon defeated Austrian rear guards at Neumarkt and Unsmarkt. On April 7, French troops reached Leoben, deep inside Styria. Archduke Charles had withdrawn toward the Semmering approaches, roughly 100 kilometers from Vienna. That night at Utzember, the two sides agreed to suspend hostilities. The guns became silent. Now the most dangerous part began. Napoleon had won the right to negotiate, but he was operating ahead of his formal political authority. General Henri Clark, the representative expected from the Directory, had not arrived to control the talks. The Austrian government understood Napoleon's position. His army was threatening Vienna, but it was also extended and vulnerable. Both sides had reasons to bargain before the military balance changed. Napoleon therefore negotiated, with two clocks running against him. One measured the time before Austrian reserves could strengthen the approaches to Vienna. The other measured the time before revolt. Hunger or a broken bridge could cut his connection with Italy. Continuing the advance might produce an even greater victory. It might also destroy the army that had created his power. Peace offered a way to convert a temporary military advantage into a lasting political achievement. Negotiations continued around Leoben. Napoleon demanded recognition of the territorial gains France had made during the war. Austria wanted its hereditary lands evacuated and compensation for what it would surrender. The discussions were not merely about ending a campaign. They were about deciding who would control Belgium, Lombardy, the Rhine frontier, and the political future of northern Italy. Venice, officially neutral but increasingly in conflict with France, began to appear as territory that could be used to balance the agreement. On April 18, 1797, the preliminary Peace of Leoben was signed. Napoleon acted for the French Republic without an express mandate for every term he accepted. The agreement ended the immediate fighting and prepared the way for a final peace. Austria accepted the loss of the Austrian Netherlands and moved toward recognizing French gains. France would evacuate the Austrian hereditary provinces it had occupied. Secret understandings opened the way for compensation at the expense of the Venetian Republic. The details were not yet final. The political transformation was. 1 year earlier, Napoleon had arrived in Italy as a young commander of a neglected army. At Leoben, representatives of one of Europe's oldest dynasties negotiated directly with him over the map of the continent. He had not captured Vienna. He had made approaching Vienna more valuable than taking it. The campaign revealed the same method used at Montenot, Arcole and Rivoli, now operating at the level of diplomacy. Create pressure, separate the opponent from his options, concentrate power at the decisive moment, then demand a political result before the opportunity disappears. But Leoben did not create a stable peace. The Directory still had to accept what its general had done. Austria still expected compensation. Revolt was spreading behind the French army, and Venice, a republic that had survived for more than 1,000 years, was now being discussed as payment between stronger powers. The next chapter would not be decided by one mountain pass or one battlefield. It would be decided through rebellion, secret bargaining, and the destruction of an ancient republic. Subscribe to The Strategic Past and follow Napoleon from the preliminary peace at Leoben to the final settlement at Campo Formio.